Hey, how are you today? It's good to have you here. It's a gorgeous day where I am, and I hope it is where you are too. So I saw my doctor for my yearly physical, though it had been 2 years, and they drew the blood and did everything else. And all my numbers are good, blood pressure is good, blood work is good, all's right in the world. So I was shooting the shit with my doctor after he had done all his stuff, and he's an older guy, old Italian from the Bronx, and as Karen's an Italian from the Bronx, I seem to be inundated in Italians from the Bronx. It's kind of fun. So we were bullshitting, and he said, Sven, I have one more question for you. What are you doing for Thanksgiving? And I said, not a damn thing. He says, good. And we started talking about COVID as a result of that. And, he said, and sort of how we're figuring it out as we go along, this whole notion of we're constructing the airplane while it's flying when it comes to the science of COVID and when it comes to the medicine of COVID. And he says, Sven, I got to tell you, as an older guy, I actually am really enjoying one aspect of it. And I said, well, what's that? He said, well, all these young doctors, amid COVID, these young doctors who growing up with Google and the computer and all this, they're used to just looking up anything at any time. Oh, I can look it up. And so now they get in the middle of this COVID pandemic, he says, and it, goes back to a bit of old school doctoring. I said, well, what do you mean? He says, well, you got to examine the patient and you go with what you know, and you go with your instincts and so forth. But you don't know for sure. It's not like what so many of these young people learned going through med school and so forth, and in the early parts of their practice. And he said, Sven, it just drives them nuts. I said, well, why is that? He says, because they're so afraid of making a mistake. They say, well, what if I screw up? What if I make a mistake? And he says, then you make a mistake. Welcome to doctoring. You make a mistake. And it was kind of interesting to hear that. And I was thinking about that as I drove home. I was thinking about that mentality that he describes, this fearfulness of making a mistake. And I was listening to this old doctor say that, medicine isn't about making mistakes, and surely you're always trying to minimize the mistakes. But he said that willingness to make a mistake, that willingness to trust your own intuition based on years of doing this shit, that willingness to trust it, knowing you might make a mistake. He said, that's the essence of good medicine. That's the essence of good doctoring, that you trust yourself, and it's not everything in a book. I thought about that, and I thought to myself, man, it's true in medicine too. I am a former NCAA strength coach. And I used to talk to my athletes about this very same thing, except in sports we call it playing loose versus playing tight. And when you're lifting, you can't play tight. When you're training, when you're genuinely trying to get bigger, faster, stronger, tougher, meaner, all those things, you can't play tight in the weight room. And what I mean is, I don't mean your muscles being tight. I'm not referring to your muscles at all. I'm referring to this muscle, this organ, your brain. You can't play tight. If you're going to get bigger, faster, stronger, you have to be aggressive. You have to constantly be adding more weight. You have to be constantly adding more reps. You have to be constantly pushing yourself. You got to play loose. And it becomes very easy the further up you get in strength to say, oh, I'm tentative, I'm fearful, what might happen? I might injure myself. And it's wise to be cognizant of potential injuries, but you can't be afraid of making mistakes. When you step up to that plate, you got to be willing to swing away. You can't be nervous and fearful you might make a mistake when you're out on the field or out on the rink or out on the court. You can't be thinking about making mistakes. One other way of thinking about it, this notion of playing tight, is the idea of sort of overthinking about it, worrying. That's playing tight. And you just can't do that. The greatest athletes aren't playing tight. The greatest athletes, like great physicians, my doctor was saying today, the great ones are confident enough in their own abilities that they can play knowing that if they make a mistake, they'll adjust and move on. Adjust and move on. But it's that confidence, and it's not just confidence in one's own ability, It's confidence that making a mistake is not the end of the world. In fact, you have to be willing to make mistakes, because if you're not willing to swing hard, you're always going to swing tentative, and that's where you're going to make mistakes. If you're not willing to take those chances when they feel right, and to trust your own instincts, if you're not willing to do that, you're going to make more mistakes than you would have just playing loose, playing the game. And you know what's interesting about that is I see that so much in my work. For instance, I've had many, over the years, many C-suite chairman, chief operating officer, chief executive officer, chief marketing officer, chief financial officers, but particularly in the realm of hedge funds, I've had many CIOs, chief information officers, over the years. And in many, if not most, hedge funds, the CIO is the one who's actually moving the money, is the one who's making the decision when to invest, where to invest, how much to invest. That's the person who is really moving the money to grow the wealth. And I've had enough of them, and I've heard it enough times, that when they do their worst work, it's when they start overthinking it. It's when they start being fearful of, oh shit, what if this goes wrong? What if this? And their mind actually already naturally does that. And they're always, of course, trying to minimize mistakes, but they can't allow themselves to get caught up in that, fearful state of, I don't know. They have to trust their intuition. That their best work, honed over years of doing this shit, and just knowing the beast that is the markets, that over years of doing that, they know their own intuition and they believe in it, and they can't allow fears or anxieties to layer over that and skew their reading of their own intuition. They have to be in tune with their intuition. I've worked with professional gamblers, same thing. I've worked with all sorts of careers, and it often comes back to this very same thing. This fear of making a mistake. Fear, and the power it has to cripple our relationship with our own intuition. It has the power to cripple our relationship with our own self. And when we have that direct line between our decision-making mental brain and our soul, our intuition, when we have a direct line without fears layered on, or without misbegotten beliefs from the past, when we don't have those and we have a clear line, we make brilliant decisions. We are in what's referred to as a state of flow. You're playing loose. You're playing confident, not fearful of making a mistake. Yeah, you're checking all your mistakes. You have your antennae up for potential mistakes, but you're not obsessed with the fear of making a mistake. And I tell you what, I've seen this nowhere more frequently than when it comes to relationships. That when someone is afraid of making a mistake in a relationship, when someone is afraid of losing someone, when someone is afraid of being alone, they'll play tight. They won't talk about the things they really want to talk about, like, you fucking hurt my feelings. Excuse me, that really hurt what you did. Or I'm disappointed. Or I just don't want to do that today. It's not always on your agenda. That I have wants too. The people who are most afraid of being alone, the people who are most afraid of losing a relationship, are always tuned into the other person, because they're fearful that if I express who I am and what my intuition is saying, what my intuition wants, what I want, if I express that to you, you may not want me, and then you may leave me. And that may sound a bit paranoid, but it is. It's playing tight. It's fearful that if I trust my own self, you may not like it. And so they play tight. They play in fear, and they're very tentative. And in the worst case scenarios, it's forever walking on eggshells, never opening your mouth, and just being completely acquiescent to the other person. In my last book, There's a Hole in My Love Cup, I talk about this notion of a relationship camel. You know how camels can go a long distance on a small amount of water and fat stored in its hump, right? Long distance. A relationship camel is someone, as I created this and think about it, it's someone who can go a long distance on a little bit of love. And so they're always, well, let me take care of that for you. Let me get this for you. No, I'll take care of you. No, what do you want to do? Let's just do what you want to do. It doesn't matter what I want. What do you want? Or it's okay if you hurt my feelings. It's okay. It's no big deal. It's no big deal. And so they give this much, but just give me a little bit of love in return, because they can go a long distance on a little bit of love. I used to be a relationship camel. I was in some previous relationships where I'd give so much and just want a little bit of love in return. Well, my clients who are in the markets and who are in finance, they call investing this much for this much return, they call that a bad investment. And sometimes we have to shit or get off the pot. Sometimes we have to cut our losses. We have to walk away from a relationship that is a bad investment, where you're investing this much and getting this much out. And it's one thing to walk away, but the real issue and the real question is, after you walk away or while you're walking away, are you actually looking at the real reason that you're accepting only this much in return or seeking only this much in return? The real reason you're doing that is because you're fearful. You're afraid of playing your own game, so to speak, or expressing what your game is and then fusing two games together, your partner and yourself. When you're afraid of being alone, when you're afraid of losing someone, oh, gee, because I'm getting old, or gee, because I'm not that attractive, or gee, because whatever it might be, you play tight and you don't express your truth. But no relationship can be real, and no relationship can truly work unless two people have the confidence that A, I am lovable, and that B, even if I do end up alone, I'll be okay. And C, that a relationship can actually work and work exceedingly well if I have the courage to reveal who I am. But that takes the willingness to play loose. That takes the confidence to believe that I am worthy and lovable. And it takes the confidence to accept that there are going to be mistakes. I'm going to get my feelings hurt. I may hurt this person's feelings, but a great relationship isn't based on the idea of there are no mistakes. I talk about it in that same book. I talk about the myth of the pain-free relationship. There's no relationship that is pain-free. And so many people think, well, I'm not going to open up until I find that person who will never hurt me. I'm not going to show my real self until I find that person who will never hurt me. Well, that doesn't exist. There is no such thing as a pain-free relationship. All there is contrition and forgiveness. The great relationships are the ones that acknowledge, like my doctor was talking about today, Dr. D. The ones that acknowledge that mistakes are going to happen and that that's okay. It's part of living in community. It's part of living in relationship. All that we really have to make up for that is contrition. Feeling it when I know I've hurt someone. And apologizing and forgiveness. Forgiveness is so critical. Forgiving of self, forgiving of the other is so critical to this notion of playing loose versus being afraid of making mistakes. Forgiving yourself, forgiving the other. And sometimes when we make big mistakes, we find it hard to forgive ourselves. We find it hard to believe that love is possible again. We find it hard to believe that success is possible again. But it is. It always is, but it takes the courage to let go of the mistakes, to not be afraid of making mistakes. So my question to you then today is, in what area or areas of your life are you most afraid of playing loose? In what areas of your life are you most afraid of making mistakes? In what areas of your life are you keeping your real self and trusting your own abilities, that trust in your own abilities, keeping all that stuff down? In what areas of your life are you not allowing your real self to flow from the inside of you to the outside of you? In thought, word, and deed, to express, to push out and create out here who you really are inside. In what areas of your life are you keeping it inside, hiding it, fearful that you might make a mistake, fearful that you may not be liked, fearful that you may experience some pain? I have plenty of clients who are afraid to open up. There's one thing that will guarantee your long-term sadness and misery is closing down after you've been hurt, closing down after you've made a mistake, closing down after you've experienced loss in career or relationship. If you close down, you've just written your life off to misery. You have to be willing to keep shedding the pain, but then keep opening up and playing loose, playing in the confidence that who you are is good, and keep putting it out there, and great things will continue to happen. So that's the challenge today. Where are you playing tight? Where you need to be playing loose. I love you. I hope you have a monster fucking weekend. I know I will. And I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.